And as soon as I moved my office just 2 blocks down, it made such a big difference. I got twice as busy.
Hello, and welcome to Beauty and the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profits. Now, today's special guest is Dr. Derek Ford. He's a Royal College certified plastic surgeon in private practice with offices in Toronto as well as Oshawa, Ontario, Canada. Now, following his presidency in plastic surgery at the University of Western Ontario, he completed fellowship training in oculoplastic, endoscopic, and aesthetic surgery in the United States, and then eventually returned back to Canada to start his own practice. Now, he's currently a faculty member in the Division of Plastic Surgery at the University of Toronto. Dr. Ford's been an active participant in a number of research studies and presentations on topics including blepharoplasty, liposuction, and breast reduction, as well as he's an active member of professional organizations in both Canada and America. So, Dr. Ford, thanks so much for coming on Beauty and the Biz.
Thanks, Catherine. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely. So, what everyone likes to hear is what was your journey from, let's say, fellowship to private practice? How jagged was it?
So after residency or during residency, I applied to aesthetic fellowships and was lucky enough to be accepted to two very prestigious aesthetic fellowships in the U.S. And that was a terrific experience. It allowed me to think outside the box and be mentored by some of the greatest surgeons at that time and still. And basically I ran out of money when I was a fellow, so really needed to go back and work, and I was able to secure a position at a hospital in Oshawa, which is just outside of Toronto, and also to become a faculty member at the University of Toronto to teach aesthetic surgery, because that's what I wanted to do. At the same time, one of my colleagues took me in. He had a building that he had built out, which had three operating facilities and office space. And so he invited me to build out one of the office spaces in that building. So I worked there part time. I worked at the hospital part time, and I worked as much as I could to get a private practice started. So I really did both at the same time in tandem, and it really worked really well. I learned how to become a very good physician and surgeon working in the system, and then also learned the details of being in aesthetic surgery, and use those skills and interchange them between the two practices. So that worked very well for me for quite some time. And over time, the aesthetic practice kept building. I got busier and busier, and then I scaled back a little bit on the hospital-based practice, but still kept it for a very long time, and until just really recently when I've committed just to be doing aesthetic surgery in my practice.
Well, so what was the blend before recently? What was the blend recon versus cosmetic?
So when I started in my first 6 months in practice, I did one aesthetic operation. It took me about a year to year and a half to be able to do one full day of committed day of aesthetic surgery. And then in the hospital, I would be working one full day of main OR surgery, and then a day of clinic and minor procedures. And then the rest of the time I saw patients. So, and then it slowly, the aesthetic days became 2 days, and then they became 3 days. And then you have to choose what you do. You only have a limited amount of time. So I scaled back on some of the hospital work that I did, and didn't commit to as much time. So initially it was probably 90% to 10% being reconstructive surgery, and then probably in the last 5 years, the pandemic changed things quite a bit, but more recently it was more like 90% and 10% reconstructive, and now it's just 100% aesthetic now.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. When did you build a solo practice for cosmetic, or did you take over somebody else's, or what was that?
Yeah, I started from scratch. I remember when I arrived in Toronto, I remember like it was yesterday, 20 years ago, I had a leased car and everything that fit in the trunk I had, and that's all I had. And I had enough money to rent a very small apartment that was less than 600 square feet. And I remember like I didn't I made appointments with bankers and I walked there's a banking street here in Toronto called Bay Street. And so I made appointments one day and I would just went bank to bank. And some people said, sure, we'll lend you some money, get started, but it'll be prime plus, 3% or something very expensive. And then one bank said, you know what, we'll give you prime, and you just need to show that you have a job so that you have a hospital appointment, and that really got me started. That was about $250,000, and then I rent. So for the first year, I had my office out of one of my colleagues' exam rooms. He offered his one of his exam rooms. So I was there for the first year until I had enough money to build out a space. And the first space I had was about 1,100 square feet. And I had that for about 10 years. And then in that same building, that was the building that had three operating rooms. So it's very efficient to be able to go upstairs and do your surgeries, come down, see patients on the days that I was there. So that's kind of how that worked. And then we also had a satellite office where the hospital was, and a very small office that we were at once a week. So we kind of gathered patients from a large geographical area. The Greater Toronto Area has about 6.5 million people, so it's a very generous population that we serve.
I think that's a really big pearl. The best hybrid I can see is when you're starting out or going out on your own is if you can have the OR suite within your building, and let's say you're renting that space and you're using their surgical center and you're near a hospital in case, that's like the best scenario on the planet.
It really is, and I think one of the biggest mistakes, and I made this mistake when I moved, is not having that flexibility or that proximity in your day. Because if you have an office and then where you operate is say a 20-minute drive
20
away,
minutes away. Yeah.
you can't see patients between surgeries, and that's a huge lost opportunity. So having it in one is great. So when I first started, I had everything in one, and then my lease expired, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to move somewhere else. I'm going to try something different. And so I moved a couple blocks down south of where I was, because there was an opportunity to purchase real estate within a commercial condo. So I did that, and that was really great. I built it out, and then it's like, well, then I'll just travel down the street and operate. But then you realize all those patients that you saw in between surgeries, which sometimes the turnover is an hour or 45 minutes, or in the morning or at the end of the day, you just couldn't do that very easily. And because of that, you really lose on your revenue, you lose on your impact in the community. And so we decided to build out two operating facilities in the new location where we moved to, and that's changed everything. And it just makes it so much better.
So did you already lease a lot of extra space thinking that you were going to do ORs, or because you bought, right? Did you buy
Yeah.
big?
Yeah, so the office space that we bought, it isn't huge. It's about 1,600 square feet. It's Toronto, so it's right in a main shopping area, or prestigious shopping area in Toronto, called the Yorkville, or where the Bloor Yorkville area is. So rent is very expensive, and it's very unusual to be able to purchase something. But this opportunity came to be. It was a new building, and you could buy suites. So I bought the first one, and I thought, boy, I'll never be able to afford this. And somehow we were able to do it. And so I bought that in 2015. We finally moved in 2017. And then we knocked on people's doors and said, hey, you're an investor. Are you using this space, or have you thought about selling your space? So then we acquired a space for an operatory, and then a second operating facility as well, just by knocking on people's doors, and then purchasing it, and then building it out.
No one's ever regretted buying their
No,
place ever.
it's
It's
great.
such a peace of mind. It's an asset you'll always have if you want to keep it. No one can kick you out.
Yes.
You can be a landlord. You can actually step away and be a landlord instead of the surgeon. It gives you so many options.
It does, and location is so important, as you know, Catherine. And so I was two blocks away, and as soon as I moved my office just 2 blocks down, it made such a big difference. I got twice as busy, and it was great. To kind of touch on the operating facility and owning space. Building an operating facility is a big deal. And especially if it's in a multi-use building, you can't just put it anywhere. You have to have the right zoning. You have to be able to vent the HVACs out the windows, sorry, outside the building. So if there's a glass curtain wall, you can't always do that. So a lot goes into that. And that process, at least for us, took a long time. It takes about a year of planning, getting the architects together, the engineers, getting permits and so forth, and about a year of construction. And and then it's very costly. So if you have a 5 or even a 10-year lease, and then the 10-year lease is done, and the landlord doesn't want you anymore, that's a huge expense and a huge time that you've put in, and then you have to scramble to find another place to work out of, and that's your livelihood. And in addition to that, you're caring for a lot of patients, right? And you've committed to them. So having that stability and owning their real estate, I think is very important.
Well, I've noticed a lot of the surgeons who have built a place out that they leased, they can't recoup that investment. Nobody else wants to buy that. They just want to take over the lease or start another lease or something, but nobody wants to buy your build out. So I would keep
But
that in mind. Another one was like here in California, somebody had done a recovery room, let's say, and if it was so many square feet, it had to be hotel credited. And he's like, oh dear God, like the just the permits involved and the regulations involved is a nightmare if you don't know what you're doing. So how did you what's the secret to doing that? Do you find somebody who's done it 10 times before this and they know all of the pitfalls or what?
yeah, so it's a really good question. So before we embarked on this, I have colleagues who've done it. So you get on the phone
Yeah.
and chat about their journey, but everything changes. It continues to change. So once you identify, say, um, a piece of real estate that you want to develop, you can do what's called a feasibility study. So you can call up an architect, so it has to be a healthcare architect who does this all the time, and say, hey, listen, I'm interested in building a private operating facility. And can you please help me out in doing a feasibility study? And certainly I'll pay you for this, for your time and so forth. And they'll say, no, I'm not interested, or we're too busy, or sure, that would be great. So if they're interested, they come aboard, they look at the space, they visit it, and they say, okay, well, you'll need this, you'll need that. They'll do a layout, and then they'll contact their engineer, and say, is this possible given the shell that we have, given the location? Are there any restrictions and so forth? Is this even possible to do? And if you go through that and they say, yeah, it is, then great. Then you buy the place. And then if they're willing to take on the project, you hire them, and then you get going. But buying it, committing, and then figuring out that you can't do it, that would be a big mistake.
For sure.
Yeah.
So when I first knew you several years ago, that you were solo. Then I checked in with you recently, and now you've got two surgeons, lots of staff. So things have changed a lot for you. so
Yeah. Yeah.
so how what was the growth pattern like, and why add more?
So when you have an operating facility, and your needs change, you need more staff to run everything, and you have more resources. So, and to for a number of reasons. Number one, if you have people around you, you're a better surgeon. You provide better care. You can't do everything yourself. If you go away, someone needs to be there. That's number one. Two, you learn from colleagues, and you're a better service provider that way. And having more resources means that you have more people, more expenses, and of course, having more utilization makes a lot more sense from a business standpoint. So by having more people, you can provide better care, and also run your business more appropriately. You can't do it by yourself. And then, of course, as an exit strategy, as more people come on, you can see yourself over time, maybe tailoring what you do, or maybe even selling parts of your business over time to exit. So that's the thought.
So the other two surgeons, who are they? I know one happens to be somebody you're married
Yeah,
to.
yeah. So one is my wife. So she's a plastic surgeon. She is a an academic surgeon, and she does microsurgery, but she's an excellent breast surgeon. So she comes in and does difficult breast surgeries and cases at our facility. So she acts as an independent provider. She's not involved in the business, but is a surgeon here. And Dr. Stephen Hanna, he was a resident at the University of Toronto who came through and trained with us. He's an extremely knowledgeable and skilled surgeon. He, subsequent to his time at the University of Toronto, he did a fellowship at the Manhattan Eye and Ear Hospital in New York and worked with some of the best people around. And we're very fortunate that he's decided to come back to Toronto and to practice with us. So um, he's been a wonderful addition, and he says he learns a lot from us, but it's the same thing. We learn a lot from him.
Right. And how do you set up boundaries? Because I always thought it would be interesting to have, let's say, um, a body guy, neck down, and then a facial plastics, neck up. And then you're not competing with patients and that kind of thing. But you went with all plastic surgeons. What's that like? And how do you divvy things up?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. So our office is just on a street called Bloor Street. So it's kind of like the Rodeo Drive
Oh,
in
nice.
Beverly Hills. And it's funny, and you walk out and you have Louis Vuitton, you have Hermes, you have Burberry, and they're all together, right?
Mm.
And why are they not separate? And so it creates a center of excellence. And when consumers come, they know to come to that area, and there's strength in numbers and choice. And so same thing with us. So I don't think it's as important to have a separate person doing separate things. I think having a very high level of care and having multiple providers and having the consumer come here or the patient come here and expect to have a very high level of care, um, uh, and having more providers providing that will even attract more more clients or more patients over time rather than just having one person.
So I'll tell you where that gets murky is in today's world with social media, because it's very difficult nowadays to market a center. You have to market a personality. And how do you handle that? Is he marketing himself or your wife marketing herself or is it all one big center of excellence?
Yeah, so for social media, we all have our own marketing that we do, but then the practice has its group marketing. So for example, PPC ads, we have PPC ads being sent on a particular procedure, and then if a person or a prospective patient wants to say consider rhinoplasty, then they'll have a drop down menu whether they like to see Dr. Hannah, myself, or we have a slot as first available. So if it's first available, then we split them up 50-50 in the practice. Well, first, when our staff call the patient, they said, did you have an idea of who you'd like to see? And if not, then certainly we divide that fairly evenly in our practice. And then my wife doesn't do facial surgery; she's exclusively breast and some body. So those leads are directed to her.
Out of curiosity, because you have the experience and Dr. Hannah is newer at this, do you have like a price level for, like, there's option A, which is you and you're more difficult to get into, you have to wait longer and you're more expensive and your consult fee is more, or you have option B, it's your associate who is very highly trained. I like to say, trained by you if at all possible, so he's like mini me, but he's more available at a lesser price. Do you do it that way, no?
So right now we're not. So right now we all have the same price, and we publish our prices online. So we try to make the practice accessible for people, and if a person, if a prospective patient says, I would prefer to have surgery in the next 3 weeks, and Dr. Hannah's available, then Dr. Hannah would see the patient, and if the patient's happy with that. So right now we don't differentiate on price. It's really on availability, and that's the way that we run it currently.
Okay. Yeah, there's no yes or no question there, right or wrong. It's just what works for you. Just out of curiosity, if you're on Rodeo Drive, I don't want to be seen. I hope you have some private exits and entrances, right?
We do. So so if Bloor Street's there, we're parallel to it, and we're on a side street, and it's a new building, and it has a special entrance and exit around the backs, which is quite private. And we're very fortunate. We're surrounded by beautiful hotels as well, and but the side street we're on is very quiet, and it's quite private.
Because I'll tell you, some surgeons have made that mistake thinking I'm in a nice high traffic area, and then
Yes,
it turns out that was
yes,
way too high end traffic.
that's a mistake. That's a
Yeah,
mistake. The good thing about our location is, when people search for plastic surgery, this area is kind of known in Toronto as a area where a lot of plastic surgeons have their offices, and it's easy to get to. So there's subway stops around. There's rail that takes you to the subway. There's lots of parking underground, despite it being in the core. Of course, great hotels, great restaurants, and it's just a wonderful place.
very nice.
Yeah.
Where does non-surgical fit into this? Are you a completely surgical practice, or you're also doing non-surgical, or do you care? Do you want both?
Yeah, so when I first, it's a really great question. When I first started, and I was encouraged to get started by doing toxins and fillers, and then I looked down the street, and I counted how many people actually did that, and actually how many people did surgery. And I thought, boy, that would be a real bad mistake for me to start that way, because I'd be competing with so many people, and it wasn't something that I wanted to do as the primary thing. I want to be a surgeon. That's what I wanted to do. So I focused on that. And then people would, our surgical patients would come in and ask for Botox, or a toxin, or a filler here and there. And so we continued to do that. And then over time, that there'd be more and more patients requesting that. So we have a nurse who injects in our practice, and also an esthetician that extends to do non-surgical things in the office. But in terms of myself as providing that in the office, I do that less, unless a patient requests a toxin being done by myself. I usually focus my time on surgery.
Gotcha. I remember many years ago, I used to do some speaking up in Canada in Vancouver, and the estheticians were allowed to run like major lasers, like CO2 lasers. And I thought, what are you talking about? It was is it still like that? Like the estheticians really had a lot of leeway,
Yeah, the estheticians do. Our esthetician does do certain types of lasers that are safe, like a halo laser, for example.
right? Uh-huh.
So yes, we do that in our practice, but deeper resurfacing, or a deeper laser that's done in the operating facility, or under some local freezing, then we as physicians would do that.
Gotcha. What's been the biggest challenge of growing your own solo practice?
Um, I would say grit. So you get knocked down a lot, and you just have to get up and keep going. And that can come in the form of having really long days, not having enough money to do what you want. And the next day is another day. You just get up, and you stay very focused on what's important, and try to cut out the noise, because there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people sometimes trying to discourage you, or give you advice on what to do. But if you focus in on what's important and cut everything out, you'll just keep moving forward, and you'll get to where you want to go eventually.
Well, as we all learn as we get older, just take advice from people who have already been there, done that, and leave the rest. you know?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So having a mentor is really good, and but I think being able to really focus is an important skill to foster and really exercise and
right.
practice. Yeah.
Any big mistake you made that you would love to share so somebody else doesn't?
I think the one that we talked about before, and not working in the same having your office and the operating facility separate, I think that's a huge mistake. You really, so if you've had it and you don't have it, you really notice how 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 less efficient you are. And the other mistake I made, and I realized very quickly, was medicine is medicine, and private practice requires business knowledge and sales. And and so you need to learn that, and you need to practice that. And so read lots of books, read books on sales, talk to colleagues, have friends that are outside of medicine that run businesses, and learn as much as you can. And because it's very unique. It's not medicine. It's a combination of the two, and it's an art, and it's just wonderful. But the more you read, the more you practice, the better off you'll be, and just be a doer, right? It's very easy to talk about your plans, but to actually go out and execute them, that's a different story. And so you write a business plan, and you quickly realize that once you start your business, that business plan changes every day. And and uh, and you need to keep changing everything and modifying how you're going to get to where you want to go every single day. So um, rather than just talking about things, writing about it, analyzing, just get started. Like, don't waste your time. So that would be the other thing. Don't waste time. If that's what your plan is to go out and be in private practice, start making plans right away, and go and do it. I have to say one other thing. So when I was a medical student, I wanted to get into plastic surgery. And I'll mention a surgeon in Vancouver. His name's Dr. Rick Warren. He's a very prominent surgeon there. And so he was the chief of plastic surgery at the time in Vancouver. So I went as a clinical clerk there, wishing to get into plastic surgery residency. And so usually when you did that, you would go to the hospital and spend time with the program director and so forth. And Dr. Warren had a unique situation. He was in private practice. He was the chief of plastic surgery in Vancouver, but he had an operating facility across the street in a building. So I went to visit him one day, and I said, "Hi, Dr. Warren. I'm so and so. I'm a medical student. I'm interested in plastic surgery." And he looks at me and he says, "Well, why are you here? Like, shouldn't you be in the hospital and so forth?" I thought, I want to see what plastic surgery was, not just in the hospital, but what you do. And then I asked him, um, so when should you start thinking about learning about cosmetic surgery? Because you just told me I should be in the hospital. And he thought about it, and he thought about it for a while. I remember it like it was yesterday. And then he said, "You know what? You should do it as early as possible, because it takes a lifetime of practice to get good at it. So as soon as you can, you should start doing it." So that was invaluable advice.
I spent, while all of you were in medical school and residency and fellowship, I was in school. I was getting a business degree, and then I was in corporate sales, and then I was in corporate marketing, and then I was in the Silicon Valley sales and marketing, and then I joined this industry and brought those skills. So you either learn it yourself or hook up with somebody who's already done it. And
Right.
like, I can shortcut so much for a surgeon. Otherwise, they're going to try to, save money. They're going to guess. They're going to test and guess, and they're going to be so frustrated because nothing ever works like it's supposed to. And it's the little nuances that make all the difference in the world. So, like, for 24 years, I've been giving you all marketing advice and business advice, and then you'll be like, "Well, that didn't work." I say, "Because you don't know the whole nuance to it. Like, there's little things depending on you, your personality, your staff, your setup, your vision, your drive, your grit. It's just, you really need help, especially in today's world. You don't have time to fool around with this. Like, look how competitive, how much more competitive is it for you now than it was, what, I don't know, even 10 years ago? You're surrounded, is it like a big deal? Like a lot of surgeons in your area?
In this area, yes. I have to say, just in Canada in general, because I train in the U.S., certainly there's more surgeons per area in the U.S. So I find that in Canada there's less, but you're right. As time goes on, there's more and more surgeons being trained here, so it becomes much more competitive. But what changes when you've been in practice is that you have this wealth of patients that you've already looked after and they're happy, and then they come back, they let other people know. So the marketing that's not directed becomes less important, but it's still important. But it becomes easier that way. But you're right. Um, there's a lot of other providers, and you do need to do something like hyper specialize in a certain aspect to become the expert in one area to get ahead.
And is there anything you did to differentiate yourself?
Yeah, so I did when I first started. And whenever you enter a market, everyone tells you it's full, you don't need anybody else. And when I went and looked for fellowship training, there are kind of certain areas that weren't very well understood. People don't really know how to treat them. One was at the time was the mid face, and then eyelid surgery and facelift surgery kept evolving. So I thought, it's probably good to try to learn that and do it properly. And so I was lucky enough to get, two great fellowships. And when I came back, I thought, boy, I'm going to hang a shingle and I'll just be busy. But then no one really knows what you do. It's like maybe too complicated. So I was able to become a faculty member at U of T and start teaching, and then people started to understand what this was and that what we're doing was different than what traditionally was done. And then people would start referring you things, referring hard patients, people that maybe had a complication or were too high risk. So it acquired patients that were really difficult. And then over time, these patients end up being really happy. And the people that refer to you would say, wow, this person's the real deal, right? They can do these things. And then it just snowballs over time, and then you become like the expert at that. And then it just the word grows. And then before you know it, there's people flying in to see you, and it's great. You get to do what you love to do.
But you're still doing PPC ads. Like everyone's
Yeah.
got to keep holes in the pond. But you just never
Absolutely.
know when one's going to yank out,
Yeah.
and.
So as you know, there's pillars to keeping patient flow, right? So there's your patients that you have in your practice. There's advertising, which is PPC or social advertising, and then there's collaboration too, right? Which is really important, which a lot of people forget about, and collaborating with other physicians, letting them know that you, number one, exist, what you do, and then what's of huge value is having the infrastructure, right? So we're very fortunate that over time we've been able to create this infrastructure where when people come in to see us as patients, and they want surgery, and it's not like, well, I have to check with the surgery center whether I can have a day, right? We know immediately what we have, and we have the resources, we can offer it to them right away, and everything's here. So having all that in-house and looking after the patient from the surgical standpoint to even the post-op care with maintenance and preparing people for surgery and having everything here makes it the journey so much easier for the patient. And then so when one person goes through that and then they tell their friends, it's like, well, it was so easy there, right? The care was amazing, it's close, people are great. I didn't have to wait. Everything was done on time, and it just makes the journey so much better for the patient, and the care is safer, and it just promotes your business even more. So I think doing good work is super, super important.
And if you have your processes down, like if it's really true that they don't have to wait, that's a really big deal because
Yeah,
most practices cannot figure that out. They'll
yeah,
boy, they'll I am so surprised that surgeons will call a patient. They'll tell their coordinator, "You know what? I only have one surgery tomorrow. Call them and see if they can come in at like, in the morning instead of the afternoon." Or call them and tell them I'm going to change the date on them, or I'm going to make them wait 3 hours because I'm running behind. You just can't do that in today's world. Or if you do, it's going to hurt you down the road. But if you run a well-oiled machine, I swear you can differentiate yourself just by being efficient.
yeah, absolutely. And having the resources is really, really important. I can't stress that enough. So having the team of providers around you that can look after patients before, after surgery, and also having the OR time that you can have access to readily. That's so, so important.
Yeah. So where does social media fit into your world? I will tell you, a long time ago when I would speak in Vancouver, I went to Toronto as well, but I would give talks many years ago, and half my talk would be, "Oh, we can't do that here. Oh, we can't do that here." And I've noticed, I think now you can. So how much has the Canadian advertising rules have changed over the years, and is it a lot more like America now?
I think you need to be very cautious, and you need to obviously have patient consent for things. You need to be tasteful. Uh, you can always run into trouble. I'll start off with social media in general, and I think some people have great success with it, which is wonderful. It does require a lot of energy. I find that busy surgeons don't have that time to spend because you're operating lots. I I'm at a point in my career where I operate 3 to 4 days a week, and I see patients on one day or sometimes 2 days, and in between, and then I have a family, and so I don't have time to. I'll post when I can, but it's not a priority for me. And but I think it's important, and it's important for people to see that you're involved. And of course, you can extend other people to assist you with that. But in terms of a return on an investment, I think it's a tough way to get a return on your investment unless you pour a lot of energy in it. And that's been my experience. So I think having a presence is important. But then again, when patients come to see you, they may say, "Oh, how did you hear about our practice?" Well, I saw you on social media. But when you really ask them, they probably saw maybe your ad, or they saw a post on social media, then they asked around, and then maybe they found a colleague or a friend that had surgery by you, and then they looked at your reviews, they looked at your website, and they did a whole bunch of other things. It wasn't just one thing. So I think it's really important to have an omnipresence everywhere. It doesn't need to be crazy, but you need to be professional and reputable. So I think social media fits into that, but it's one piece of your presence.
And an important piece too. Does Dr. Hanna, the younger fellow or associate, is he more into it, or is that how he's building his practice?
So I think he's doing a bit of everything. So he spends some time on social media, and certainly we shoot videos together, and he
Oh,
does independently, and I think that's been helpful for him. But also he recognizes that there's other avenues that all work together. It all kind of meshes together. If you're just on Instagram and you didn't have any, say, for example, reviews online, or if you didn't have a website in general, or if your office may be questionable, I think people will look into that, and I think that could potentially hurt you. So I think um, taking looking at basically all your qualifications and all your presence on in the public eye is very important.
so you've done a pretty good job with the before and after photos. Any tips for getting consent because that's one of the biggest challenges. You can't get your
Yeah,
patients to approve these things.
yeah.
You're doing something though. So how do you have a process or how you
Yeah,
do?
well, that's a really good question. So, my first fellowship was with a surgeon by the name of Oscar Ramirez, and he really thought outside the box. And when I arrived in Baltimore, where he practiced at the time, he said, Derek, you're going to take all the photos. And I'm like, what do you mean? I have no idea how to take photos. I don't know photography. He goes, don't worry about it. I brought my photographer in from California. He's going to be here for a week. He's going to be set up a new photo room, and you're going to work with him for a week. So he taught me photography. And then the other thing he told me is that when you set up your office, one of the most important rooms that you're going to have in your office is a photo room. And he said, don't think of it as, wasted space. It is super important for a number of reasons. And he was absolutely right. So my first office, I put a photo room in. So so every time I see a patient in consult, I take a picture. Every time I see them in follow-up, I take a photograph. And I take the photographs.
Nice.
And so I have it as part of the flow, and it's really important for documentation. So if a person comes back and says, "Hey, Dr. Ford, I'm not sure whether I see a result or not," and you say, "Well, let's look at your record, right? This is where you started. This was where you were at 6 weeks. This is where you are now at 6 months. Let's look at it, right? Let's learn from this." And so it validates what you've done, and you also learn, right? So you learn as a surgeon. It's if you look at the photographs, which I always do, it's like, well, that's not working out so well. Maybe we should change what we do here. And so it's great that way. And then you can use it for talks if you have consent, and also before and after pictures. But so the way that I've always done consents for that is, I usually, if we ask everybody, and I usually ask after surgery. So so I ask after surgery, and we have a form, and it says, would you like to share your photographs in the office? Yes, no. Would you like to do for a publication? Yes, no. I'm sorry. Would you like to do um, for website? Would you like to do it for social media? And then they check off, and then we also offer, if it's on the face, whether if they don't want to show their entire face, it can be a cropped picture of just the lower face and neck, or just the eyes, or just the nose. And so that's another option that sometimes helps people feel confident in their decision to share the photographs for educational purposes. And they also have to always know that they can change their mind. So
Right.
despite signing that day, they can call back in a couple months, or whenever, if they change their mind, to change their mind about the consent. So
Yeah.
it's really a privilege to be able to share their photographs for education. But if they change their mind, they can do so.
Well, I love that you give them the option of not saying no completely. Maybe you get 20% out of it. I just don't want to leave empty-handed. I would ask. And are you directly asking them yourself, the doctor?
I am,
I
yeah.
think that's a great idea. I think they say yes to a
Yeah.
doctor way sooner than a staff person.
Yeah, because you have that connection with
Yeah,
them, and you leave it in their hands, and we just do it in a standardized way. So I ask every single person. I don't single
good.
out people, whether they're good or bad results. You can learn from everything, and it's been very, very helpful. It's been helpful in managing expectations of future patients. It's been helpful for showing people what we do, or the before and after pictures can be helpful for people that have come into the office, and then they go home and they say, "Hey, you know what? I saw Dr. X, and this is what they talked about. And let's look at the website. These are the pictures we looked at." And so that can be very, very helpful for an educational standpoint.
Right. So we're going to wrap it up soon. Give me a crazy patient or staff story you care to share.
When I first started, my first secretary or staff member was with me for a few months, and so I was at the hospital a lot, and I would call in. I'd said, "So how did it go? Did we get any referrals?" "No, not much. Not much happened. It was pretty quiet." That just kept happening over and over and over again. I thought, something's really weird here. So I finally we parted our ways. I let her go, and then we're going through the her computer at the time, and she was running businesses, her own businesses through our office, and
Oh my God.
that's what she was doing during the day. So, um, yeah. So the thing I took from that, it's how, if you can afford it, have more than one person to start with, and people take vacation, and it it and then you're left with no one. But it's really important to have two people if you can afford it when you're first starting out.
That is
Yeah.
crazy. You know, it's really crazy. Why would she leave the records on your computer? Like there's proof there. That's
It,
insane.
yeah, I don't know. Well, yeah, she departed quickly, and maybe she didn't have the opportunity to take those records off. But yeah,
Ah, when things like that happen, don't you like that's how you get distrustful quickly. And then you get skeptical and you get paranoid about hiring another person. And oh gosh, I
yeah,
assume was that your worst hire? It got a lot better after that?
it was.
Good.
Yeah, but you learn, and the people that surround you make your practice, and they're everything.
Yeah.
And having the right people, and as you know from your background, it's so important. It makes or breaks businesses, and having the right people on the bus that are committed is everything. And not no one's perfect,
Yeah.
but one thing that I've learned over my years doing this is that you have to communicate to your staff what's important and what your expectations are, and and give them goals, and make sure that you communicate every single day with everybody. And that's and that way people mold into a team that creates a culture that is transparent, and where people aren't afraid to talk about things, and just be open. And I find that's very, very important.
Right? It
Yeah,
takes some maturity to get there, you know?
yeah,
I
yeah. But
used to think,
you learn from mistakes. Yeah,
well, I used to think culture, who has time for culture? We are so busy. And now I get it. I didn't
yeah,
where I did get it now. So
yeah,
I was going to ask you to tell us something interesting about you. And just I find very interesting that you have three boys. Dear
yeah,
Lord, what is
yeah.
that like?
So my story is, I'm an immigrant. I was born in Warsaw, Poland, and I
Oh,
had a different last name when I came here. I came here when I was 4. I,
Poliski? What
uh,
was it?
Brzozowski.
Yes.
My dad always told me that, you should consider changing your name. It may cause you some trouble. Back in the day, those were different times. And I thought, everything's fine. I love my name, and then I got into clinical practice as a clinical clerk, and I would get called all the time to spell my name, and whether it was correct, and it just drove me crazy. And I thought, Dad, you're right. Let's change my name. And so the criteria was something really short, that no matter where you are from in the world, you can pronounce it and you can spell it. And so we came up with Ford, and it stuck. So that's where it is now.
So you can literally come to America and say, I want a different name now. I didn't know that.
Uh,
That's
you
amazing.
can you can change your name. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just think that's probably the biggest improvement you made in your whole career. Because what was your name? The original?
Brzezowski. And so,
Brzezowski. Oh
yes,
my gosh.
ghettos, and it's a great name, but it's just it created a lot more work. And so I just,
Oh,
I obviously I'm very proud of my family and where I'm from, and so forth. But from a professional aspect, having a shorter name made a lot more sense.
especially if you're going to be in the business world, this is
Yeah,
difficult enough to be
that's
called Ford. I mean, what a great name. Is your name really Derek or is it a
it
different?
is. It's Derek. Yeah.
Oh, it really is Derek. Okay.
Yeah.
But I love the Ford idea because I work with so many surgeons who came from, like, let's say the Middle East, and they just have to go with Dr. J or Dr. B, or because the consumers can't remember all that, or they
No,
just don't know you well enough to stay there
no.
long enough to figure it out, you know?
You're
Good.
right. It's all about your patients, all about the consumer. It's not about you when it comes to professional life, and you try to make it easy for people.
Oh, that was a killer pearl from your dad. Good for you. Good for him. So do
He's
you
a
think
smart
any of
man.
yeah, do you think any of your sons are showing any promise to following your footsteps?
Yeah, they are. I mean, both my wife and I are plastic surgeons, so we're quite academic, and our boys love school. They love sports. They all play very high level soccer. So we play soccer every single night, 7 days a week, and there's three of them. So there's a lot of driving and a lot of carpooling and a lot of travel and going to academies and so forth, other universities. So it's a very exciting. We're very, very fortunate.
Wow, very good. Well,
Yeah.
nice to see you. And if anybody wanted to get a hold of you, I know your website is fordplasticsurgery.com. I don't
Yeah.
even need to spell that. It's fordplasticsurgery.com.
It
And is there
works.
what's your Instagram handle?
Oh, so yeah, so it's just doctor, so DR dot, and then my name, Derek Ford, DEREKFORD.
Nice. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you, Catherine. Thanks for everything that you do for our specialty. It's you help us out as a community and make us better practitioners and better able to serve our patients and run our practices in a successful way. So thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you. So everyone, that's going to wrap it up for us today. If you have any desire to leave me a review or subscribe, that would be terrific so you don't miss any other episodes coming up. And then if you've got any questions or feedback for me, you can leave them on my website at catherinemaley.com. You can also book a strategy call with me, or you can DM me on Instagram at Catherine Maley MBA. Thanks so much, and we'll talk again soon. The fastest way to success is to model other successful surgeons who have what you want, but you can only see their results, not the path they took to get there. So you continue to jump from one thing to another, hoping to find something that will work for you too. But it rarely does. So try this shortcut instead. It's guaranteed to move you forward. I compiled my intellectual property to grow cosmetic revenues, everything I've gleaned over the years, into one playbook of the most successful practices and what they do to win. Go to cosmeticpracticevault.com and let's grow your cosmetic revenues.